A quick word before we get into this week's episode. I was talking to a head of school recently who said, Peter, we've got a strong strategic plan, but every time we try to act on it, things stall. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Big goals are easy to write down, but they often get bogged down in the daily, making it hard to stay strategic. That's why I built the school operating system. It's a framework that helps you align your team and focus your priorities so you can actually execute the plan. We work alongside you to extrapolate a one-year plan from your existing strategic plan, break it into 90-day sprints, and design a much more effective meeting rhythm that moves your team closer to your strategic vision every single day. And that's just the start. We support much more to help you build the operational infrastructure your plan needs to succeed. If you're serious about making traction this year, let's talk. Visit moonshotos.com/SOS. That's MOONSHOTOS.com/SOS to learn more and set up a time to chat about the school operating system. Hi there, my friend. I'm Peter Barron. Welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. I am thrilled to be joined today by Samantha Coyne Donnel, who is the head of school at Steamboat Mountain School, and Mona Gibson, who is the board chair at Steamboat Mountain School. I've gotten to know them over the last 6-7 months. A really fascinating school, kind of K-12 boarding day. But I brought them on because they are an example of a very successful school merger. And, and sometimes those are hard to find, right? Like as this topic becomes more prevalent across the industry, I'm finding that these are kind of conversations that I'm having about what goes into a successful merger. And so excited for Mona and Samantha to be here today to talk about how they did it. I mean, how did the merger get conceived, and then how did they unify the two schools? Because that's often the hardest part of the equation. So, with that, Samantha, Mona, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be here.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you both. And before we get started, if you want to just introduce yourself and Steamboat Mountain School, that would be great. Samantha, why don't you kick it off?
Sure. Wonderful. Yes, I'm Samantha Coyne Donnel, head of school at Steamboat Mountain School, K-12, the only K-12 day boarding school in Colorado. I arrived in Steamboat in 2017 to become the head of school at what was then the Emerald Mountain School, K-8. And about 4 years into, starting before that, 4 years was the official time we merged with the upper school. But about 2.5, 3 years into my tenure, we started collaborating closely with the upper school, and the topic of a merger came to be. And so since 2021, I am now I've been the head of the K-12 day boarding Steamboat Mountain School, which is has 2 campuses in Steamboat Springs, and very committed to experiential education and especially with a focus on global learning and global competencies.
That's great. Mona, how about you?
Well, my name's Mona Gibson. I'm a longtime independent school supporter, the board chair at Steamboat Mountain School. Many generations of my family have gone to independent school and even started at independent school. I also have an understanding of boarding schools, having gone to one. My grandfather and my father went to boarding school. 3 of my children have gone to boarding school. I taught at a boarding school. I'm also an experienced board member with service on a museum board, a public charter Montessori school board, a visiting nurses association board. I'm very interested in board governance and development and best practices for school boards.
Welcome again to the pod. I'm curious. So let's dig into it. So Samantha, you were the head at Emerald Mountain School, and then Steamboat was the high school. How did the whole conversation around merging come about? Like, what was the strategic thinking at the time between the two boards?
Yeah, the initial conversation really started as a collaborative effort. So the head of school, Meg Morse, who was the head of Steamboat Mountain School at the time, and I met regularly because we were the only 2 independent schools in town and did not compete with one another, both very small. There were a lot of similarities, some differences as well. Her, school day boarding started out as a boarding school in 1957, has been around forever. my little K-8 school was started actually from an idea to kind of mirror some of the same programming and values and aspirations of the upper school and bring that to the K-8 landscape. So we had a nice collaborative relationship as soon as I came into town. What I saw early on, and we shared some of the same board members as well. What I saw kind of early on as I was running this small school and talking with Meg was, we both had a lot of needs, right? You have to be scrappy. We didn't have a ton of resources. So we were trying to do a lot with a little, right? I would read articles about like why you can no longer have a communications office of one. I didn't even have a communications director, right? And so we started to talk about, are there shared efficiencies we can gain by looking at each other, whether it's even just marketing independent schools in Steamboat Springs and to share resources. What are the benefits? And so we created a task force together at the board level that really that didn't start with a question, should we merge? We started with a question of how can we work together and collaborate more closely to strengthen our organizations? And then the merger question naturally came up from there.
Interesting. So you were you were looking at it like, hey, are there efficiencies that we can gain together? Could we have a shared marketing office? Maybe you're thinking a shared like business office, accounts receivable.
Business office was one. I called Meg and said, "Hey, Meg, you're don't kill me here, but could I take can I take your CFO like 15 hours a week? I'll pay him this. I need this person." And so she's like, "Okay, let me think about it." So we really started at that, at that sort of like granular level, and before we got to some of this bigger picture thinking about like, hey, this could really, like, we don't have to look at it as like line item by line item. Let's think about this more broadly.
So did you actually start that process? I mean, did you share a communications office? Were you leveraging their business office, or did you skip from there to the merger conversation? Just real after you did the thinking.
No, we shared a business manager. And then, again, we started the business manager, and then we started with those conversations around looking at, our board members and other ways that we could help support each other, thinking about marketing. And so we didn't really then, the kind of sharing a business manager was an action step that we took. We then realized from there, like, hey, like this is one small thing that made actually quite a big difference for me personally at Emerald Mountain School. But we said, I think we're thinking about this too granularly. Like, could we really think about this from a much broader perspective of how we could join forces, not necessarily merge, but how we could collaborate to strengthen how we operate.
It sounds like with each step you took, and I don't know, this is just me reading into it. You can tell me, Peter, you're way off here, but like it was an iterative process, right? There was trust being gained with each step. So maybe you took a small step, then a slightly bigger step, so then the big step, right, to the merger conversation. Is there something to that?
Yeah, I think there's something to that is really leaning into process and questions and idea generation and not being afraid to bring people together from the boards and say, let's explore what this could mean. And so we started asking questions and looking at shared marketing, looking at communications, looking at staffing. And then, probably in a meeting, someone said, hey, why are we two different schools? We share a lot of the same values. Our missions are very similar. Why not look at becoming one school together? And then we launched a whole different process from there.
So I'm curious. I know we're going to talk a lot about the unification and because that's often the trickiest part. But what were some of the steps that you like once that was put out there and people are like, hey, let's look at this at a more holistic level. Like, what would it look like as a single school? What were some of the things that you had to work through to get to the place where both boards agreed, like, hey, this makes sense. Let's do this.
Yeah. So we start with like an exploration task force. We brought on a consultant early on to find out like what are the questions that we should be asking one another. in our organizations. We created sort of a shared folder of due diligence. So we had to kind of open all of our books to each other, and be really honest and transparent, right? Because it doesn't work if one school is going out and trying to hide one thing, or you put it all out there. But I think we had full trust from the beginning that if we were going to do this, we needed to be open and honest and candid. And while I think the board members who are working towards it were really excited about the idea, we didn't want to be blindsided by any, information that maybe we were overlooking, because we were all so eager and thought, yeah, this will be a great idea. But that's why we also wanted to bring in some third parties along the way to really do due diligence, to look at our books. What would this decision mean? To look at our programming from the student experience. But I would say that step-by-step process really started with our boards working together and trusting this task force. But then we really worked closely from the start with the idea of, once we made those decision points and you had sort of a decision-making framework, once we went through that framework, then you kind of go to another framework, right? So you go through like your decision-making framework. Should we do this? Yes or no? Then once the answer was yes, now we have a whole merger implementation plan that you follow, a communications plan, a design thinking task force to re-envision, imagine the whole cultural and student programming and faculty. So, there's a lot of steps that go through, but you have to kind of work each one first and not get ahead of yourself.
How long did the whole process take?
Let's see, so we merged during COVID, which was really interesting. We started the conversation in about 2019, we started working together, and then started in 2020, having that merger conversation. And even at one point during COVID, the board said to Meg and I, this is a lot of work, and you're also running schools during COVID. Can you do this? And we said, I think we have to do this. I don't think this is the reason why we're doing this, because there's going to be another pandemic. There's going to be another threat, another disruption, whether to the market, to independent schools. We are doing this because we firmly believe we are stronger together in terms of the programming we can provide for students and for families, and financially for our sustainability, so we can be around for future generations. And so then once we kind of got to that point, got through COVID, so okay, we're doing this, we're merging in COVID. Then it took a year to put it all together. So like we merged technically January 1, 2021 as a business, but we didn't really merge operations. We had 2 heads of school, 2 board chairs for 6 months until July 1, when we had one governing body, 1 head of school.
And now a word from our sponsor. Leading a school today can mean juggling a dozen different systems across offices, finance, fundraising, marketing, enrollment, and academics, all pulling your attention in different directions. At Blackbaud, we believe it shouldn't be that way. That's why we built Blackbaud's Total School Solution. It's a fully connected solution designed for private and independent school leaders who want a clear view of their entire operation. From tuition to transcript to donation, you get one ecosystem, one login, and one source of truth. This isn't about more software. It's about smarter strategy. When your systems work together, you spend less time chasing down data and more time leading. Want to see what Blackbaud's Total School Solution could do for your school? Visit blackbaud.com. That's BLACKBAUD.com to learn more. How did the transition process lead to a single head of school? What did that look like?
Yeah, Meg was retiring, and I think so she wanted to retire. I wanted to continue as head of school, and the board decided that it made sense for me to continue through the transition, to have that continuity. Meg stayed on with me, just reporting to me directly for 1 more year post-merger as Director of Strategic Initiatives, so she could really help at that high level, fundraising, donors, donor meetings, some of that just transition of strategy, working with different groups and constituents. And so that was really important to us. But I do think, Peter, to your question about the leadership transition is, it's hard, right? I think it's hard either way, whether if the schools merge and bring in a new head, it's a lot of transition. And like you're already building something new while also trying to retain that history and that culture of two schools and bring those together for something new. But then even as a head coming from kind of the K-8 level to the 9-12 level, right? I had to manage the loss that the K-8 was feeling from me sort of not being there, the head of the K-8 every day. We're on 2 campuses, and the 9-12 who kind of lost, right, their head and now absorbed me as a head of school, didn't go through a traditional leadership transition process. So I was kind of managing that with my team as well.
It just strikes me that there's so many things that have to go right. You have to have you have to have board members that are open to the idea. You have to have like tight enough mission alignment so that it works. You have to look at the leadership level and say, you know what, like there's only going to be one head of school on the other side of this. So, people have to be at the right phases of their career to be on board with this transition. And that to me, like that's so hard. It maybe it's part of the reason why these things, you don't hear about more of them is because there are a lot of roadblocks that can pop up along the way. But I'm curious. So now like fast forward, you officially merged on January 1st of 2021. Then I imagine like you put a lot of hard work into it, but then I would guess even more hard work, maybe even harder work, came on the other side of it. I don't know, but like what strikes me, and I've been part of like mergers before. I was part of a merger before, so I kind of lived a little bit of it. But there's an inevitable loss of like identity along with like how's the culture going to emerge on the other side of this. How did you deal with that? Like, how did you deal with like making sure that you're honoring both schools' identities and histories, but then creating something new? I mean, Mona, as a board chair, what were some of the things that you've thought about as we've gone through this process?
This is something that actually came about really naturally and in a really positive way. So we had the board meetings with the 2 boards meeting collectively for 6 months. And then we went down with 2 board chairs. And then we went down to 1 board chair and 1 board with sort of a dream team board of people that were super committed to the merger. And at our first board retreat as 1 board, we talked a lot about what this was going to look like. We knew that we were a boarding school and a day school. We knew we had 2 campuses. We knew we had the in-town campus for our K through 8, which in Steamboat is a real value add. And we also knew we had an amazing 125-acre campus, which we call the Mountain Campus for our 9 through 12. We knew that we had very distinct programming. We knew we had our global studies program, which we're all really committed to. And that is on the middle school level as well. And we also have this competitive winter sports athlete program that we were also committed to making that happen. And so I feel like we went into that retreat sort of wondering if we were going to have to pick some things to focus on. But because of the strength of our board and the commitment to our programming, we decided to continue doing it all. And I think we recognized that that was going to be complicated and would be a lot of work, but everyone was really committed to maintaining that. And that made a huge difference for our board because it basically steered all the decisions, knowing that we were going to make it all happen as a board and committing resources to that, committing strength in programming, really committing to our mission made things a lot easier.
So that was almost like you set the North Star. You're like, this is it. This is where we're
Exactly.
going. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think there was a big sense of relief too, that we didn't have to let any of our programs go. We didn't have to compromise. And I think that made our board feel better. And then I think that also, filtered out to our parent body, filtered out to our alums, and made everybody feel good.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you roll this out to your community? Because a lot of the work that we talked about up until this point, I'm sure was done quietly, right? Like the behind the scenes. But then once you made the announcement, what did that look like? Like, how did you roll it out? What were the reactions? What were some of the things that you anticipated that you had to prepare for?
I anticipated a lot more of a stronger reaction from like our alumni community, especially at the upper school level. But the thing is, for them, I would say we kept our name, and so I think that was huge. Not moving campuses, so alums are coming back to the same place with the same name. I still was expecting maybe some more pushback, but I think as Mona just said earlier, because we retain two campuses, and not every school that merges has the luxury of doing this, right? If you're maybe a K-8 merging with a 612, or a K-12, maybe absorbing a K-5, right? There's lots of different things, structures of schools, of um with that impact what that merger looks like. But because we were a K-8 with 912, it did allow us to sit for a little bit and say, like, the day to day is going to look very similar, and that's what people care about, right? I think, like, we were very people oriented in how we went through the process, right? So faculty, right, want to know, am I going to have a job? And is my job going to look right? First thing is, am I going to have a job? And then is it going to look totally different, or whatever I'm doing here? And so a lot of that we kept same for the reason of being able to spend some time together to sort of design an aspirational K-12 program that preserve cherished histories and traditions, while creating and reimagining a new vision for the K-12, right? And you need time to do that, and you need people and voices and input in that process. And when you are planning a merger, right, like you said earlier on, most of it's quiet. Like, you're keeping most of your planning quiet. You're talking to some key donors. We had a founder who's still in the mix, so we had conversations with her, right? So, but you don't want the word to get out before you are ready to roll out your communications plan. And yet, so much of the good work that happens to have a strong unification involves alums, involves parents, involves students, involves faculty. So you need to ensure that. I think part of the success of our merger was that we gave ourselves time within our merger implementation plan to then bring in a different task force that really allowed us to, what we did is we developed what we call our design principles and our core principles, and those provided the shape for everything that we are going to do going forward and evaluate.
So you announced it, then you went back to the community and said, we need your involvement, basically.
I think we also had a tremendous branding effort that was really timely. We did have the same name at the upper school, but obviously it was a different name at the lower school. We had a big marketing effort with the aesthetics, and that provided a lot of opportunity to create a sense of cohesion. All of a sudden, there were vans at both campuses that had the same logos, and you could see them around town. And we had sweatshirts that the students could wear, and jackets that the faculty wore. So some really small sort of cosmetic things like that helped create a sense of unification.
Did you find that the lower school, the K-8, I mean, because in many ways, I don't know if in many ways, but their name changed, right? So like, they're no longer Emerald. Was there anything in particular that you had to be mindful there? Because for the high school, it's a little bit easier because Samantha, you said like things didn't change, right? Like it's
Right.
very similar. But now you're walking into a school on the K-8 level that has a brand new name, new logos, new sweatshirts, all the things. Was there anything there that you were like, okay, we have to pay special attention to this?
I would say, we preserve the name of the campus, right? So it's the Emerald
Mm.
campus. And so we were very thoughtful in that you can still talk about yourself as the Emerald campus. You're just part of now a bigger team, Steamboat Mountain School. And hey, you've got this little lovely campus. This is our downtown urban campus in Steamboat Springs. And we've got our, 140 acres to play on at the upper school where our, kindergartners can come go in the sledding hills in the winter, and our middle schoolers do a outdoor orientation expedition up on our campus on our trails in the fall. And so, our approach is like you have the same and more, right? Like your day to day is, you're still doing all the great things that you're doing on your campus, and now you have access to more students, to more resources. Faculty can, come eat dinner and have community dinner at the upper school. Faculty have, bigger cohort, right? I'm not the only Spanish teacher. I've got a team that I can bounce ideas off of. And I think, we really came from that approach of like, like, I think it can be oftentimes a merger, like you're dealing with feelings of loss. And we were really trying to emphasize, hey, we're not losing anything here. No one's losing anything. We're gaining. We're only gaining.
Yeah. Were there any challenges along the way that you look back at, you're like, "Oh, hadn't quite anticipated that"?
I think the biggest challenge for me personally, Peter, is just as a head of school, right? I was very clear in my mind that I was I was clear that I was not sure what I needed for a K-12 admin team to support the unification of the K-12 and the day-to-day operations on two separate campuses. And I think so I just said, I'm going to sit for a couple years with the current structures that I have, and see what everyone needs, because I feel like if I just kind of made a guess of what the team should look like and the positions I needed, I wouldn't get the best answer. In that, it was pretty messy. I think like the leadership transitions, and it's 2025 right now, and I finally this summer have the team in place that is what I believe is needed for both the K-12 and the operations at each campus. And so that's 4 years of some transitions, of some from me not having the support I need. The Emerald campus, I feel like, didn't have enough support because we were growing enrollment down there. We were getting bigger and expanding the middle school, and but not having the space to have more administrative support at that campus. So it was also getting my full senior admin team of, hey, we're all down at the Emerald campus and supporting and spending time down there, and bringing in some roles that now were expanded from the student and faculty programming side, had oversight and responsibility at the K-12 level, right? So I couldn't be the only person in operations. The board was there. The board was there from the start. They're like one school. We're here. But it was hard to get people out of their silos, especially when you're on two different campuses. So I had to get some leadership positions that had responsibility and ownership within the K-12 program. And that's been huge.
Mona, what about you? Is there anything that popped up at the board level that you were like, didn't quite anticipate that?
Well, I think one thing that Samantha did really well was to really introduce the two faculties to each other. She took the time to have the lower school Spanish teacher go up and to the mountain campus and talk to and observe the upper school, and similarly with other departments. So I think that that was something that could have been a problem, but she really created that sense of departments for the teachers, which provides buy-in for them too, and security. So that was great. I think from the board perspective and maybe from the parent perspective, because at the time I had two students at the school, The K through 8 parent picture is quite different than the 9th through 12th parent picture. There were a number of families for whom the merger was just neither here nor there. They were at the 9th through 12th, they were just doing that and getting through those 4 years. Whereas our Emerald campus parents, um, we've always felt that that was our special sauce, a lot of parent involvement. Parents help out at lunch. Now, you can't go help out at your 11th grader's lunch. They're not going to be happy to see you that time of day. So that has been sort of an interesting, maybe adjustment from what I expected to see as a parent, coming to terms with that, and then just honoring that has been fine. Also, because of the pandemic, we have had a lot of new families move into Steamboat, and it's been fantastic having a K through 12 option for them. And so not only are we having more of our graduates move from the Emerald campus up to the Mountain campus, we're able to help a family that has children in all 3 divisions. So that has been a big bonus for families. So I would say it's also been more fun for the older students than anyone expected. Last year, we had our first annual tree lighting event, and the older students planned everything. And they had karaoke, holiday songs, and they made an enormous mess making gingerbread houses. And it really was fun for the young children. It was fun for the older children to plan that. It was fun for the parents to see that. It's always great for us to showcase to our younger families what our older students are doing. And it culminated in a big tree lighting ceremony, which ended up being a really special and fun event for the whole community.
And what a great example of creating new traditions, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah, and being
are
thoughtful about that, Peter, because I do think, right, and that it's always hard, and in any school calendar is always a nightmare to work around, and adding, and our team has really, I would say, worked hard to be very just thoughtful about not just creating for the sake of creating something new, but how are we building on our values, our aspirations, and finding something to that makes sense for who we are, and it doesn't have to be 10 different things,
right.
or it's made, and it doesn't have to even be something completely new, but maybe a twist on something, like for example, one of the things we had to do is when our 12th graders graduate, they select a faculty to speak on their behalf. And so every student gets an individual graduation speech. Well, the Emerald campus had adopted that tradition when it started. And we said, well, now we can't. And because those classes were smaller, those speeches were longer. So yeah, it feels strange that then you kind of have this, if as you continue on this same trajectory, and feels a little bit different. We wanted that 12th grade graduation to be special. So we reworked that into kind of into a dinner, a really intimate, dinner, a little bit different, created some new traditions for the younger students that I think makes sense for that K-12 kind of scope and sequence of student programs. So you have to think about it all, all together, and bring people into those conversations to make sure that, and being really thoughtful about communication. Like here's the why, if maybe there's a tradition that's shifting a bit, with the goal again of retaining what's special, which is, we really see kids for who they are. We appreciate and value and care for kids, in only ways that a school that is small like us can do, and to really keep those and hold those up as we move forward.
I love that. And the other thing I'm hearing there is you're not going to have it all figured out on day one.
No,
Right.
no. And I think, Peter, actually, we could have, I think, probably made some missteps because we tried to maybe force a timeline. For example, we went with our core principles first. So we spent a year with a design implementation task force that came using design thinking to come up with 5 core principles, and all sort of under the umbrella of this phrase thriving through contrast. And so we spent a lot of time, and we did about 50 empathy interviews with alums from both schools, students, faculty, to design these principles. So when we had merged, we had just adopted and kept the upper school, the Steamboat Mountain School mission, but we knew we had to change it. But we didn't change it till a year later, and go through that process. We knew it needed to change, but we felt fine where it was. Same thing, Mona talked about the logo and the branding. It was great, but we didn't have that all right at the start. In fact, we were hoping to, and we brought in a consultant that we work with, and we know the marketing team at the board level, that for the rebrand, we weren't excited about it. We didn't feel that spoke to us enough. So we decided to reboot and get it right. And, I know everyone wanted their sweatshirts and their stickers, but sometimes you think like those things are most important. But one of the things I think that really kept us on track was really focusing on the people, on the student experience, the day-to-day student experience of students and faculty, and making sure we were attending to that, while these other pieces we knew had timelines, and we would get there.
Mm-hmm. Samantha did a really great job with that, as did our board, because it was sort of an unusual combination of being very patient, but also being very nimble. And that worked really well for us.
Last question as we begin to wrap up here. If a head or a board chair called asking for advice about merging two schools, what would you recommend? Like, what would you say? Hey, absolutely do this, or avoid this thing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think one, I'd say bring in your board and your leadership teams as soon as you can, right? Sign the NDAs, spend time getting to know each other. And I think that was our greatest strength. Our board came together early on. Even when we were operating two boards side by side, we'd meet together essentially, even though we were still on paper, two boards. Everybody was like, once we went through the process, because there's going to be things on everyone's balance sheet on either side that no one's thrilled about, but there's going to be things on either balance sheet that people are thrilled about. It's easy when maybe a bump comes up to say, well, if we didn't have that, the debt ratio, carry that debt from the building at this campus or whatever, to point fingers there. But the board never did that. And I think there was, once you get to and go through your process and say, we're here, start thinking and operating like one school. So I think that was huge. I think don't be afraid to you have to bring in consultants, outside experts to poke holes, to test. We were really excited. We didn't have a lot of complicated endowments that we had to work through, but we didn't want to be naive in saying, are there things we're missing? So I think bring in outside people to test that. And then I would say lastly, focus on so much effort, I think, focuses on the things that you have to do, the new articles of incorporation, when you're going to file that, your bylaws, you got to do your compensation and benefits for your faculty, and get a unified scale. So that's going to happen. But I think you cannot underestimate the culture, and how are you building and creating a unified culture that's exciting and new, while preserving tradition and history and values from both places. And that's the toughest work with. I don't think there's a recipe for success for that, but you just cannot pay enough attention to it throughout from start to finish. We're still merging, I would say. We're still unifying and bringing our culture together, and we're still paying attention to it. It's still on my goals list as a head of school. Every year there's something connected to that to continue to strengthen our unification.
It's really important if you're considering a merger, you need to make the distinction between a merger and an acquisition. So we were a true merger, and that is a totally separate set of considerations, excitement, issues. If it's an acquisition, that's going to be something very different. So I think knowing from the outset what your goal is there is really important.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. Like if you're two equals merging, it's going to be a different conversation than if you have a dominant acquirer versus the school that may be in a tough spot. Okay, my friends, Mona Gibson, Samantha Coyne, Donnel, thank you so much for sharing. If anyone wants to reach out, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can just email. I know email's the best for me, scdonnell@steamboatmountainschool.org.
Great, awesome.
And the best for me is just email as well, monagibson5@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Thank you both. This is such an interesting conversation, and I know we barely like scratched the surface on it, but I learned a lot and appreciate the success that you all have had, 'cause I know it's not easy. So thank you both.
No, thank you, Peter.